Hey, biology students. This is going to be our slice of mind or our Wednesday brain lesson for today. So, justice is a word you may have heard before. It's an old French word from justice. I don't really know how to pronounce that, but it means equity. If you've heard of the equity team at Tech that you could join, that's so things that deserve to be rewarded or deserve to be punished do. That's the idea of justice or equity, meaning equality in regards to rights in this case, or in the case of equity. So, if we can ask about justice in the world, can we consider the world a just place? Do people get what they deserve um, in the world? So, other ways to say it might be: do people get what they deserve? Is good rewarded and evil punished on a fair level? And if you think yes, then we can give an example that demonstrates or supports that the world is just. So, things like karma or punishment fits the crime, eye for an eye. All those are ideas of a just world. And if you think no, then think of an example that demonstrates or supports that the world is unjust. So if an innocent bystander gets hit by a runaway bus, or if a child um, dies early from eye cancer or something that doesn't seem like they deserved it, whether it's a punishment for something evil or a reward for something good. So we're going to look at how justice serves us in the world, how we change it, how we can consider the world just or unjust. So check this out.
Have you heard of the phrase, you got what you deserved, you got what was coming to you, or you reap what you sow? These phrases imply that there's always an almost predictable and appropriate result, a consequence for our actions. In these cases, a negative action, you got what was coming to you. You did something wrong or inappropriate, and something bad was almost definitely going to happen to you as a result. One of the things that this implies, it implies a hypothesis called the just world hypothesis. Noble actions are that are performed by an individual are always rewarded, while evil acts are always punished. So, take, for example, our colleague Tom, and here we have the world. The world is obviously not to scale, and Tom normally resides there. And I'm going to draw this arrow, and this arrow represents actions that Tom does onto the world. So, the first thing is, what if Tom performed a noble act? He helped an old lady cross the road. What would we expect? According to the just world hypothesis, we would expect a predictable, appropriate, fair consequence. In this example, the consequence of a noble act would be a reward. Now, the opposite may also be true. If our friend performed an evil act onto the world, according to the just world hypothesis, he may be punished. Now, what this suggests is that there is some kind of special force, some kind of cosmic justice at play that makes sure that good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished.
I just want to pause here for a second. And can you think of this in the opposite direction also? So, like if you give a kid a reward for doing a noble act, does that count? Or if you punish somebody um, into doing an evil act, if you this happens to you, you have to do this. How does that work? If we put the carrot before the task or the reward before the deed?
And many people think in this way. The reason why they may think in this way is because it helps individuals to really rationalize the good fortune or the misfortune of other people. It helps them in their own mind to explain why other people may be doing very well or very badly. Secondly, it can help individuals feel that they can influence the world in a very predictable manner. It's much easier to plan for the future and engage in goal driven behavior. If I work hard, I know I'll get what I want. If I put the effort in, if I put the hours in, if I go to school, if I do the right thing, I'm going to get rewarded in life. Unfortunately, however, the just world hypothesis doesn't always hold true because there are a series of threats to it. People aren't always rewarded for their noble actions, people aren't always punished for their evil deeds. And using the just world hypothesis, we may, for example, blame people who are in poverty for being poor, or we may blame people who are victims of domestic violence for being victims. So, one of the things we know about the just world hypothesis is that it's challenged on a daily basis as we walk around the world. The world simply isn't fair. And what we know is that when we see the world isn't fair, when we see good deeds being punished or evil deeds being rewarded, we need to try and mentally make sense of that. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. So, when this just world viewpoint is threatened, we can approach it in two different ways. One way we can approach it is to use some rational techniques. We can accept reality. Or two, we can try and prevent or correct injustice. We can set up charities or the legal system or set up a petition. But another thing that can happen is we can use irrational techniques. And in this case, we may go into denial, refusing to even accept that we've seen a situation or the situation exists. And we may also reinterpret the events that we've seen. So if we've seen somebody who is a victim of violence, instead of thinking, wow, this person was really hurt and they was such a nice person, and this really challenges our just world viewpoint, we may think, we may kind of reinterpret the outcome. We may think, well, you know what, it wasn't that bad. It was more of a trip or a fall. They weren't really assaulted. It could have happened to anyone. We could reinterpret the cause. You know what? It's because they're walking in a really tough neighborhood, and that's why they were assaulted. We could reinterpret the character of the victim. I always thought that she was a really good human being, but now I realize that she probably isn't. She was hanging around the wrong people. Morally, I'm not sure what kind of person she is, and that's why these events happened to her. So, by reinterpreting events, the outcome, the cause, and the character of the victim, we can use these irrational techniques to keep our just world viewpoint intact. Now, I want to look at this little blue line at the top of the page because one of the things that we like to think about is how do we explain the behavior of other people, otherwise known as attribution theory. And attribution theory is split up into internal causes, factors related to an individual and an individual person's disposition, and also external causes, factors related to a situation. And one of the things that we should appreciate about the just world hypothesis is that it very much seems to over attribute people's actions to personal or dispositional factors and under recognizes the complex situational factors that may be at play. For example, if we see somebody that's very poor, we may think, these are personal failings. This is down to them not taking responsibility for their own actions, rather than recognizing the complex social and situational environmental pressures that may have been placed upon them. Have you heard of?
Oops. Okay, so just for a little recap, um, if we have a just world hypothesis, it helps us to think about that in the way that if I failed a test, in my eyes, it was the test or the situation that made me fail. But if you failed a test and told me about it, I would think that it's your fault, not the situation. So we do that in order to justify or rationalize or make ourselves feel better about failure or um, success in the world. I hope you understood this. If it was kind of over your head, don't worry about it. We can talk about it in a different way at another time. Thanks, guys.